If you are over 60 and you wake up already tired, tired before the day has even begun, I need to tell you something my grandmother told me when I was 45 years old and sitting at her kitchen table in Brooklyn, barely able to hold my coffee cup without my hands trembling from exhaustion. She looked at me the way only a woman who has survived everything can look at you. And she said, "Sarah, you are spending your energy faster than God intended. You have forgotten one of the oldest laws." I didn't understand what she meant that morning. I do now. And today I'm going to share it with you. My name is Dr. Sarah Levine. I am 68 years old. I trained at Hebrew University of Jerusalem at the Hadassah Medical School, and I have spent over 40 years combining the rigors of Western preventive medicine with the ancestral wisdom I first encountered in my grandmother Rachel's handwritten notebooks. For the last 2 decades, I've worked specifically with women over 50 in Israel, in New York, in Miami, and now here in Boca Raton. Women who are told by their doctors that their blood work is fine, their thyroid is fine, everything is fine, and yet they cannot get through an afternoon without collapsing. Women who used to run households, run businesses, run marathons, and now they feel like they are running on fumes. What I've discovered through medicine and through my grandmother's teachings is that the energy crisis most women experience after 60 is not a mystery. It is not inevitable. And it is not a problem that was invented in the 21st century. Jewish women have understood this challenge and its solution for over 3,000 years. It is encoded in one of what I call the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, a system I've spent 4 decades documenting, cross-referencing with modern science, and teaching to women who were told they simply had to accept the way they felt. Today I'm going to share one of the most foundational of those 7 laws with you, the one my grandmother called the first medicine, the one she said every other practice depended on. And toward the end of this teaching, I am going to share something she revealed to me only after I'd proven I was ready to hear it, something she called the hidden side of this law, the part that most women never learn. So please stay with me all the way through, because that piece changes everything. This is one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity that I have spent 40 years documenting. Each one builds on the others. And this one, this law, is where everything begins. My grandmother, Rachel Levine, was born in Łódź, Poland in 1921. She survived things I will not name here because this is not the time for that particular weight. What I will tell you is that she arrived in Brooklyn with almost nothing. No money, no possessions, no certainty about tomorrow. And she proceeded to live vigorously and with full presence until the age of 98. She never took a prescription medication until she was 90 years old. Not one. And in all the years I knew her, from my childhood, through my medical training, through my own middle age, I never once saw her move through the world with the kind of gray, grinding fatigue that I see in my clinic every single week. I used to think it was genetics. Then I thought it was circumstance or attitude or perhaps some mysterious reservoir of will that survivors carry. But the older I got, and especially when my own body began to fail me at 45, when the fatigue and the brain fog and the hormonal chaos hit me with a force that 20 years of medical training had not prepared me for, I understood that what my grandmother had was not luck. It was a system. It was knowledge. And she had written it down. Her notebooks were kept in a wooden box under her bed. The writing was in Yiddish, in a small, careful hand, with occasional phrases in Hebrew. Some pages were stained with what I believe was olive oil. Some had tiny sketches of herbs I later identified as hyssop and black cumin. She had written recipes and prayers and observations about the body in the same margins without distinction, as if medicine and faith were the same language. For her, they were. I want you to type something in the comments before we go further. Type the words, "I still have energy left to give," because what I am about to teach you is only useful if you believe it is true. And those words will help anchor that belief as we go forward together. Now, let me tell you what is actually happening in the bodies of women over 60 who feel this kind of persistent, bone-deep exhaustion. Because understanding the problem is the first step toward dissolving it. According to data published in 2023 by the National Institute on Aging, fatigue is the third most commonly reported health complaint among women between the ages of 55 and 75, behind only joint pain and sleep disturbance. And here's the detail that matters. In the majority of those cases, there is no identifiable pathological cause. The thyroid is functioning, the iron levels are acceptable, the adrenals appear normal on standard testing, and yet these women are exhausted in a way that rest, the rest they are currently getting, does not fix. I know this because I lived it. And I know it because I have sat across from hundreds of women who described exactly this experience with tears of frustration in their eyes. The conventional medical explanation focuses on three culprits: declining estrogen, disrupted sleep architecture, and what researchers now call mitochondrial inefficiency, the gradual reduction in the energy-producing capacity of our cells. These are real phenomena. They are documented, and they are, to a very significant degree, addressable. But here is what conventional medicine consistently fails to tell you, and what took me years after my own crisis to fully understand. The primary driver of mitochondrial inefficiency and chronic fatigue in women over 60 is not hormonal. It is rhythmic. It is about the fundamental rhythm of how we use and restore energy. And we have broken that rhythm so completely in modern life that most women don't even recognize it's gone. My grandmother understood this. She didn't have the language of mitochondria. She didn't know what cortisol was. But she knew something that Maimonides, the great 12th century physician and rabbi, a man who served as the personal doctor to Sultan Saladin, and who wrote what remains one of the most sophisticated manuals of preventive medicine in human history. Maimonides knew it too, and wrote it into his regimen of health in 1198. He wrote that the body must be given its appointed rest, not merely when it collapses, but as a scheduled, non-negotiable law of living. Not rest as reward, rest as foundation. This is the root of what is causing so many women's exhaustion after 60. We have turned rest into something we earn rather than something we practice. We rest when we have finished, when everything is done, when everyone has been taken care of. My grandmother would have looked at that logic and said, but everything is never done. And so you never rest, and so you are always tired. Here's what modern science confirms. Researchers at the Salk Institute in California published findings on circadian biology, the science of the body's internal clock, showing that when our daily rhythms of rest and activity become disrupted or compressed, the mitochondria in our cells, the tiny energy-producing engines that run everything from our thinking to our digestion to our mood, those mitochondria begin to function at a fraction of their capacity. Not because they are diseased, because they have not been given the conditions they require to restore and regenerate. A 2022 study published in Nature Aging found that irregular rest patterns accelerated biological aging markers more significantly than diet or exercise habits alone. More than diet, more than exercise, irregular rest. Let that settle for a moment. This is not new information to the Jewish tradition. It is, in fact, 3,000 years old. Today, I am sharing with you one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity. This is the first law, what my grandmother called the law of sacred rest, and what every Jewish tradition in the world knows as Shabbat. I have watched women dismiss this because they are not Jewish or because they associate it with religion rather than biology, or because they think I'm telling them to do less. I am not telling you to do less. I am telling you that you are currently doing rest wrong, and that getting it right is the most powerful single intervention I have seen transform energy, clarity, sleep quality, and mood in women over 60 without a single supplement, without a single prescription, and in most cases within 21 days. Let me explain what this law actually is and why it works. In the Jewish tradition, Shabbat is the seventh day, the day of rest commanded in the Torah, in the fourth of the Ten Commandments. But what most people, even most Jewish people, do not fully appreciate is the physiological intelligence of this design. 1 day in 7, not 1 day when you feel like it, not one afternoon here or there, one full day in 7 every 7 days, dedicated entirely to restoration, dedicated to it as a law, as seriously as you would follow any other law that governs your safety and your survival. In Hebrew, the obligation to care for the body is called Shmirat Haguf, the guarding of the body. The Talmud in the Tractate of Berachot instructs that we must tend to the body's needs as an act of holiness, not as an indulgence. The body is described in our tradition as Tselem Elohim, made in the image of the divine. To exhaust it without restoration is not discipline. It is neglect of something sacred. My grandmother observed Shabbat not as a religious burden, but as what she called the week's medicine. From sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, she did not work. She did not worry, or at least she practiced the discipline of not letting worry dominate. She ate slowly. She sat with people she loved. She slept when she was tired without guilt. She walked outside. She did not answer to anyone's urgency but her own body's. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that you cannot do that your life does not permit it, that you have responsibilities, grandchildren, work, obligations that do not pause on a schedule. My grandmother survived the loss of everything she had ever known and rebuilt her entire life from nothing in a foreign country. And she still kept Shabbat. I say this not to judge anyone, but to gently suggest that the story we tell ourselves about why we cannot rest may be worth examining. But here is the deeper practice, and this is what I want you to truly hear, because this is where the physiological transformation happens. My grandmother didn't just rest on Shabbat, she prepared for it. From Wednesday onward, she began what she called the slowing. She cooked in advance so Friday held no frenzy. She refused to begin new obligations late in the week. She began sleeping earlier on Thursday. By the time Shabbat arrived, her nervous system was not slamming into a wall of enforced rest. It was arriving at a shore it had been approaching for days. And on Sunday, she didn't immediately accelerate back to full speed. She eased out of rest the way a ship eases out of harbor. Researchers at Stanford University's Sleep Science Division have described something very close to this process in their work on what they call sleep pressure and circadian entrainment. The body's ability to produce and use energy efficiently is directly tied to the consistency and quality of its rest activity cycles. When those cycles are predictable, the body can pre-position resources, hormones, neurotransmitters, cellular repair enzymes, in advance of what's needed. When those cycles are chaotic, the body is always reacting and never preparing, and chronic fatigue is the result. This is not metaphor. This is the biochemistry of why you wake up tired even after 8 hours of sleep. The practical application of this law in modern life does not require you to be Jewish, to observe Shabbat in its full religious form, or to rearrange your life in ways that feel impossible. What it requires is this: choose 1 day in every 7. Whatever day works for your life, and treat it as sacred time for your body's restoration. Not for catching up, not for the errands you couldn't finish, not for the family obligations that feel more manageable on a weekend. One day for your nervous system to shift from the frequency of output to the frequency of restoration. Protect this day the way you would protect a doctor's appointment that you cannot miss. Because in the tradition I was raised in, and in the medicine I have practiced for 4 decades, it is exactly that. Begin the evening before. This is the piece most people miss. The evening before your rest day, eat lightly and early. Step away from screens by 8 p.m. if you can. Sit quietly for 20 minutes. Not to meditate in any formal sense, just to stop moving and let your body register that the pace is changing. This is what my grandmother called inviting Shabbat in. Modern neuroscience would call it activating the parasympathetic nervous system in advance of sleep. The effect is the same. Your body begins its restoration cycle earlier, deeper, and more completely than it would if you fell asleep, still vibrating from a full day of demands. On your rest day itself, there are 3 practices my grandmother kept that I now understand through a medical lens. First, she ate her largest meal at midday and her smallest in the evening, and she ate slowly and with attention. This aligns perfectly with what chronobiologists now call time-restricted eating aligned with circadian rhythm. The body's metabolic efficiency peaks in the mid-morning to early afternoon, and digestive demands late in the evening interrupt the body's nighttime repair processes. Second, she walked outside every rest day, even in winter, even briefly. 20 minutes of natural light exposure in the morning resets the master clock in the hypothalamus, the pea-sized structure in the brain that coordinates every hormonal and circadian rhythm in the body. 20 minutes, that is all. Third, she refused to apologize for sleeping. She napped without shame. And she woke from those naps with what I can only describe as an authority about her own energy that I have spent my entire adult life learning to replicate. But there is a second part to this law, a part that my grandmother always taught alongside the rest practice, and without which, she said, the rest itself would be only half as effective. It involves something she kept in her kitchen that most of us have heard of but have never understood the full significance of. I will be sharing that in a coming teaching because it is a law unto itself and it deserves its full time. I want to be honest with you about something. There was a period in my 50s, after I had already discovered my grandmother's notebooks, after I had already begun studying and teaching these 7 laws, when I abandoned my own rest practice. The demands of my work multiplied. I was traveling between Miami and New York and Tel Aviv. I told myself that the work was important, that people needed me, that I would rest when things settled down. You know how that story ends. Things did not settle down. I gained weight in my midsection in a way that had never happened before. My thinking became sluggish. I became short with people I loved. And when I finally sat down and looked honestly at what I had stopped doing, it was this. It was the first law, the one that everything else is built on. My grandmother used to say that the 7 laws don't work like pills, one at a time on demand. They work like a garden. All 7 laws together, tended with consistency, season after season. You cannot plant seeds and then stop watering. You cannot harvest from a garden you have abandoned. The energy that women over 60 believe they have lost is, in most cases I have seen, not lost. It is waiting. It is waiting for the conditions that allow the body to produce it again. And the first condition, the foundation here, is this: sacred, consistent, unapologetic rest. We live in a moment in history where the pressure to be constantly available, constantly productive, constantly responsive has never been greater. The technology in our pockets is designed, and I say this as a scientist who has read the research, it is designed to disrupt the very rest cycles that sustain our health. Blue light, notifications, the infinite scroll that keeps the nervous system in a state of low-grade alert that mimics threat. My grandmother did not live in this world, but the laws she kept were designed for exactly this kind of world, for a world that would always try to take more than the body could give, and for women who needed the wisdom to say, with authority, not today. Today belongs to restoration. To summarize what I have shared today, your energy is not a fixed resource that depletes with age. It is a renewable resource that requires specific conditions to renew. Those conditions have been known in the Jewish tradition for 3,000 years, codified by physicians like Maimonides in the 12th century, and confirmed by modern chronobiology and sleep science in the last 2 decades. The first law is rest, not passive, accidental rest, but structured, protected, rhythmic rest that teaches your body when to produce energy because it knows when to stop spending it. This is not optional. In our tradition, Shmirat Haguf, the obligation to guard and care for the body, is a commandment. The body is described as Tselem Elohim, made in the image of the divine. The Proverbs tell us that a cheerful heart is good medicine, and I can tell you from 40 years of practice that a rested body is a cheerful heart's best chance. When you honor your body's need for rest, you are not being indulgent. You are fulfilling an ancient obligation to care for something given to you in trust. There is another of the 7 laws that must always be practiced alongside this one. Without it, what I have taught you today is only half as powerful. It involves what you put into your body on the morning of your rest day, a practice my grandmother called the opening of the week, and what researchers at the University of Maryland now call one of the most significant adaptogens documented in natural medicine. I will share it in my next teaching. Make sure you are subscribed and make sure you have the notification bell on, because I cannot guarantee how long I will keep these teachings available. If this has spoken to something you have been feeling but haven't had words for, please share this with a woman in your life who needs to hear it. The women who transform their health after 60 are not the ones who find the perfect supplement or the newest protocol. They are the ones who return to the oldest knowledge and finally give themselves permission to follow it. And before you go, leave a comment. Tell me how many days a week you currently allow yourself true rest. Not sleep, rest. I read every comment. Your answer will help me understand what to teach next. Until next time, l'chaim, to life.